Hi there, BJ.
Hey, good morning.
It's good to have you catch up. So, what's going on in your world, real quick, before we get started here?
4 weeks to the season, every coach knows what that's like as you start to get close and the panic sets in. Do I have the lineup? Do I have my bus schedule? Do I have everything taken care of? So that's the place I'm at right now. How about you?
I am a little behind you. I'm in the process. I'm going through the onboarding process, so I am not quite hired yet, but I'm going to be coaching a program here in Apache Junction. And it should be fun. I got to see the facilities, which are pretty good. Could be more up to date. Volleyballs are going to be a challenge. So if anybody has a good line, any of our guests have a good line on some inexpensive volleyballs, I'm all ears. Inexpensive, reasonable quality volleyballs. But I saw what we have, and it's okay. It's a start. But we've got three teams, and I think I've got at least one other coach on board, although she doesn't know it yet. But they're going to be talking about that this week, and I've got another guy I think I can get, but we'll see. And then other than that, it'll be figuring it all out. So I was working my bus timing yesterday, the
Yeah, all
distances
the
we
same
go and
stuff.
all.
Everybody does.
Everybody does. So while you tell us a bit about our guests, I'm going to share a few little things that were sent to me or
Sure.
that I've got. So
Yeah. Beth is the head coach at Georgia State. I think a topic of discussion that we can have today is transitioning from player to coach, which many of us have done. Maybe not at quite the same elite level as what Beth is at, and then just talking through. I think a topic that we don't hit enough, which is women's beach in college. I think, and we'll ask this of Beth, but I think it's maybe one of the great success stories in our sport, certainly in the last 20 years or so. So we can talk through that as well. But yeah, let's get around. Let's have us stop blabbing and listen
all
to her
right.
more.
Got to look at her facility in town. So we don't think a beach as being a urban thing, but it certainly can be. Hi, Beth.
Good morning. How are you?
Great.
Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm really excited to get to talk with you guys a little bit about beach volleyball, how it's emerged in college, and then, talking some about the transitions and pairings. It's a big puzzle piece. The nice thing is, I was listening to you guys talk. We are not yet scheduling buses. So I have a couple of months before that stress sets in. So
Yeah.
I'm still recovering from the last season.
Right. When we started negotiating to have you on, it was just a week after your season was over. We had talked to Hassak, who he was hosting the men's championship, indoor championship, which is the same weekend as the women's beach championships. So we were kind of trying to go 1-2 with you guys, but so you're just recently out of your system. You're decompressing right now.
Yes, to some degree. We also, for beach, July is the biggest month for recruiting. So since season's been over, I've taken 3 trips to California, have one more, 2 trips to Texas, and 2 trips to Florida. So it's you have like a couple weeks to recover from season, and then you hit the ground running, looking forward to what's next.
Yeah, it's a interesting sport that way in that you can finish your season and then dive into the recruiting. I think it's almost in some ways it's similar to to the indoor women because they finish in December, but then they really don't have to necessarily take off right away. They get, maybe a month or two, and they can all go to the big championships and everything.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We get to work really closely with our indoor team, and so kind of watching our schedules, they're very similar, but just almost opposite. But it is nice, I think, for indoor to have a longer time to decompress after season. But the indoor season's also longer than the beach season, and so I think it's very earned and very warranted.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just step back a little bit. How did you? We ask almost everybody that comes on. How did you start into volleyball? I mean, I know you were an indoor player at Georgia State, but
Mhm.
um, how did you start into volleyball and kind of walk us through both the beach and the indoor, if you
Yeah.
can?
Yes. So indoor, I was the tallest person in my seventh grade school, and I hated it, and I was super uncomfortable. And my parents thought it was really important that we found something to make me feel more confident with being one of the taller, females at that. And so we tried basketball. I'm not a contact person when it comes to sports, and so volleyball was just it. Like I started playing, and my heart and soul just like clicked with it. Like by the time I was in eighth grade, it was so much of my identity, and I loved learning about the game. I loved the teamwork that was involved, and you can imagine like when you're first learning how quickly you improve. So it was really, really addictive in that sense, and I always wanted to be playing volleyball. And I grew up in Florida, and so when I was in college, a lot of my friends started playing beach volleyball. And so we'd go out to Clearwater Beach, and all the nets are at men's height, but I didn't know there was a difference between men's height and women's height. So, like, you try to play beach volleyball as a high school kid, and you couldn't hit, and there wasn't enough people on the court to keep the ball in the air. So, I was, I don't know, really deflated after trying to play beach volleyball the first couple of times. And I was like, yep, I'm definitely an indoor kid. Um, and then after college, one of my great friends in college was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna play on the pro tour from beach." And I was always so confused because we're not that good indoor, and I think beach is actually requires a lot more skill. Like it's a lot harder, I think. Um, but we did it. We started playing grass first, and so there's a lot of grass volleyball in the southeast, and I think it's becoming a lot more popular across the country. But it was a really nice hybrid of fewer people on the court, but still the skill set that we were familiar with indoor. So grass is, like just a lot more power, not as many shots. And so started playing grass, kind of figured some of that out, and then tried playing beach and realized we were really terrible. And it was actually really fun being terrible. We played, like we'd always say, we played indoor volleyball in the sand. It wasn't like playing beach volleyball. And we moved out to California. We moved to San Diego and got into a great group of people who welcomed us there into the community and taught us about the wind and taught us about the defenses and all the strategies that went around with it. So we started learning how to play beach volleyball in the sand, and just kind of took off from there.
That's cool. Yeah, that's how I learned, was on the beach, and only played indoor because it's Wisconsin and there was no beach. When I when I was when I first started playing, we have indoor facilities now, obviously, but um, and a couple that are pretty close, so we can get there. But indoor was like an excuse, and luckily there was a mentor here that was a beach guy, and so we used to go. Matter of fact, when you said Clearwater, I went, "Oh yeah, I've been down to AVP in Clearwater."
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to go to AVP here in Wisconsin, and Chicago had it, Grand Haven, Michigan, and then we went and hit a couple of places in Florida over spring break or whatever. We'd go down there.
No, it's so neat how one person can make such an impact in the direction you go with a game or the direction you go with the sport. And I feel like just like you were saying, BJ, like you had one person that knew how to play beach and they kind of showed you the ropes. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this entire beach volleyball community is generally how willing people are to help people learn.
So, and you spent a number of years on AVP as well, doing
I
that.
did. Yeah, so that's why we moved out to San Diego to try and play AVP. And after being there for a couple of months, realized that it wasn't like a very fast transition to get to that level. And I ended up deciding that I would invest 3 years to see if I could make it. And I think I qualified in my second year, and spent the majority of my career at the top of the qualifier and the bottom of the main draw, just trying to, edge ahead every tournament. And finally, after, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years, started having some stronger finishes and really engaging and learning about the game, and making adjustments and strategies. But playing on the AVP was an incredible experience. I got to play a little bit too, for USA and the NORCECA tours, and I got to go and do a couple of trips in Mexico and things like that. And it was just an incredible journey, in losing. Like, I say this all the time, but I think it is so pivotal to who I am today, that it was really clear to me, like, my goal was never to win an AVP. My goal was to play the best that my partner and I could play, and to compete as hard as we could compete. And so when we got a couple of top 10 finishes, I remember going to dinner with my partner that night and just being like, I feel like we just got a gold medal in the Olympics. Like, this is way beyond what my goals were. Like, I just wanted to be a top 15 finish, and I was going to feel really good about my career. And it's so neat to see how many people move out to California or really focus in Florida on, they want to play in the Olympics. And it seems so attainable until you step into that bubble. And when you get into the bubble, you realize how elite these humans are that are competing for those Olympic spots. And Olympics were never my goal, but I wanted to see how well I could do. And I think losing every single weekend, and finding the small successes and those losses really has helped shape me as who I am as a person, and how I just deal with daily life now.
How weird was it for you? And you did this obviously at a much different level than me, but the first time that I got to teach for USA, they hand you the shirt, it says USA on it, and I traveled a little bit for them. It was really weird. What was it like putting it on you for the first time as a player?
Yeah, I just remember we were doing the technical meeting. We had our bikini tops that said USA, and I was like, I'm going to frame this thing. Like, this is such an incredible honor. You hear people talk about like imposter syndrome, like you're not supposed to be there. And I didn't feel like I wasn't supposed to be there, but I felt like I was so lucky to be there. And I just wanted to make the very, very most of it. And it was really incredible to me, especially on the NORCECA tour, how many international players were so welcoming to everybody that was new. And I think like one of the first ones I went to was in Guatemala, and Majo, now who's coaching at TCU, stood up and was translating everything from Spanish to English for those of us that were not bilingual. And she like made great strides and like great efforts to make sure that all of the Americans who weren't fluent in Spanish knew what to expect and how the tournament would be run. And to me, like I will always remember that moment and how much of an impact she made by making us feel welcome there. But it was getting to put on anything that says USA is like, it's a pinch me moment, really, just really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny to me about the translation, I went to Morocco for an FIVB, and the translator gets so much credit for what they say, because even though they're not the person that's necessarily delivering the message, they're still delivering the message.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And it is like that, you realize that person is your lifeline, because if you don't have that person, then you just got to keep looking around the room and trying to figure out who's going in which direction and which way you're supposed to go. But it is like having someone that's willing to step into that role makes a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to hear the intonation coming in and then duplicate that going out in another language. And when you think about, I was just thinking about a comedy routine where the guy's going, they're just playing with the word dude, or dude, or they've got to get that. They got to figure out what that meant and tell you.
Yeah. No, it's really, really a special role, and it was a big deal. And it's been really neat now in my career, like actually getting to go and work with USA in a coaching capacity. And it's like so many full circle moments. And I think generally where we have gone, it's been most people are trying to speak more English to make it easier, but it would be really cool to be bilingual.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So let's back up just a little bit to get into women's beach.
Yes.
I was saying as we were coming on that I think it is of all the things that we've seen in volleyball, it's probably the biggest success story that I've seen, certainly as far as growth, but maybe as far as anything, since I've been involved in the sport. It started with a couple of clubs, and all of a sudden it just blew up to a point where, I mean, now you can watch the whole tournament. The women's tournament at Gulf Shores is on all weekend on ESPN. It's just incredible, and it's easy to watch. It's in a neat format, and I don't know if we just got lucky as a group, like somebody chose the right format and packaged it correctly. But I mean, you were there more or less from the beginning. I mean, you were coaching at Georgia State before it was a fully sanctioned NCAA sport.
Yes.
So what was that transition like, just in the beginning, moving from, I mean, it must have been just incredible when you finally got the go ahead to be NCAA.
Yeah. So I mean, from the beginning, so beach volleyball started as an AVCA, like it was sponsored by AVCA in 2011, 2012. That was the very first year that it happened. And the first duel was UAB and Florida State. We were super lucky to have leaders that were willing to put in a ton of time. So Nina Matthews, Anna Collier, and Kathy DeBoer were just investing hours upon hours of figuring out what is the best format. Like how does this sport take on a team format when it's very individualized in every other capacity? So how do we build it into a team format that's going to include more than 2 people per school? And so they drew from tennis, they drew from indoor volleyball, they drew from lacrosse, and tried to find what the right fit might be. And I know there's other people on the committee, and I'm sorry that I don't know their names off the top of my head. But so it was really nice initially to have people planning years in advance of what this would look like. And then, so AVCA said, hey, we're going to sponsor it. We're going to get it started. We have to get 40 schools within, I think it was 6 years in order for it to be adopted by the NCAA. And we played for 3 years before we hit those numbers and were able to get sponsored by NCAA. So Georgia State, we started our program in 2012, 2013. And so I think we were like the 16th school to add. I think there was 15 schools in that first year, and just had some very passionate and strong and critical thinkers, like very great people who were willing to put down a foundation and then try to tweak it as we've evolved. And I think one of the conversations that we have as coaches constantly is, how do we figure this out with flights 1 through 5? How do we make it more fair? But I really think like we're really close to having it right, where it is a team sport, and every pair has a ton of value, and every person on the team brings a lot of value. And so it's been incredible just watching the growth. And I remember our team when NCAA picked it up. So initially when AVCA was running, it was called sand volleyball. And so every now and then I'll still see someone wearing a shirt from the locker room that says sand volleyball. I'm like, that shirt's like 10 years old at this point. But it was really neat that when NCAA picked it up, they went ahead and adopted the beach concept, and had enough faith in schools still buying in, even if they weren't by a beach. And the initial idea was, hey, if we call it sand, we're not limiting to schools that are on beaches. And so I thought that was a really nice idea. It was very, very hard for me going from playing beach volleyball to then coaching sand and like trying to change that word. I had an amazing mentor at Georgia State. Her name is Tammy Adia. And every time I would say beach, she's like, it's not beach in college, it's sand. I was like, okay, it's sand. And to some degree, like that also helped me to shift the mentality of not being an individual sport. It's like now we have to build a culture of a team around what we've all done as very like almost selfish. Like volleyball is you're looking out for yourself in beach volleyball, and you're trying to find a great partner that's going to complement your strengths and who has points and all of that. And now all of a sudden you're going to put it in the college space, and there's going to be 16 to 25 people on a roster, and see how you can build around it. And so it's been really incredible to see how many schools have done it differently and so well across the board.
I just I was poking around this morning just doing background research, and I just love the way your facility looks in
Thank you.
in downtown Atlanta. It's Steve showed it before. It's 3 courts. It's surrounded by a couple of buildings, and there's that huge mural, that's an incredible addition to that facility. You can see lights. It feels like a really comfortable place to play, even though there's no water next to it. It just looks cool to, it looks like a great place to go.
It's a lot of fun. And it's so crazy, BJ. Like so many people will walk up and be like, I can't believe this is right in the middle of the city. So when you're looking at that picture, the mural wall is actually a train. It's a train track. So the train is actually going by in that picture. So the trains drive by, they honk. And for the first, I think, 5 years of our program, that wall was gray. And our administration decided one year, they're like, we're going to brighten it up in here. And so they put up this mural. They hired a company to come and paint the mural. And it really, like, you go in there and like just everything's like, it doesn't matter how hot it is, how cold it is in the day. You see the colors, you feel the sand, and it really helps you to like focus in on where you are. And then at night, like we do, when we're training in the fall, we have a Wednesday night lights series that we run. So we practice at night under the lights, and you get to see these gorgeous sunsets, and then all the lights of the city as well. So it really is an incredibly unique facility. Being on the hill, we had to come up with a creative way to do it. So that's why the courts are tiered. But I think that's another thing, like all the schools around the country, like every facility is a little bit different and has its own footprint. And it's really neat to see how schools have been creative with spaces and maximizing the number of courts. Being one of the first schools to adopt, we built 3 courts. We also are somewhat limited with our campus footprint being in downtown Atlanta. But now as facilities are getting built, schools are usually looking at building like 4 to 7 court facilities.
Yeah, that seems closer to what I've heard as maybe 5 or something like that. I don't know how many Gulf Shores has. Obviously, they have the 5 competition courts, but I bet there are a bunch more around.
Yeah, so Gulf Shores will have the 5 competition courts, and then they'll have 4 warm-up courts. And so there's plenty of space for the teams to get mentally and physically. So like essentially the 2 teams getting ready to compete will have courts to be practicing on before they head out.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty neat. So your success at Georgia State, I mean, you guys had a super. I mean, you were good all along, but then the super breakout year comes in 2022.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you get that first win to get you into the second round at Gulf Shores, and then you pick off the number 2 team in the country, and all of a sudden Georgia State is you're now on the big stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember talking to my husband and just being like, it was so cool to get to be a Cinderella team in something, like to come in as the team that everybody's like, oh yeah, you're lucky to be here. And to some degree, we're like, we're lucky to be here. We had an incredible conference tournament. So that year we were playing in Conference USA, and going into it, I think we played FAU 2 or 3 times and we lost them every single time. And so we knew, like, going in the conference, the only way to get to the national championship is we'd have to win our conference. And so we got to match up against them in the semifinals, and we were down. Like, it was the same story as national. Like, we were down on most of the courts. I think it was maybe 1-1, and we're down on 2 other courts. And we were really lucky to have some incredible leaders on the team. We'd had a couple of like transfers that were just playing pivotal roles for us. And so Kayla Whetstone, who had come from Florida Gulf Coast, she like looked around and she's like, yep, it's go time. And she's just one of those kids that can kick it into that gear. She's like, oh, we're losing by a lot. They're losing over there. We got to start winning. And she could just hit this next level of competition in those moments. And she did it at a conference, and then she did it again at the national championship. So it was really fun to, I think even in all of those wins that we had, like we started off and we got crushed in most of our first games, and it didn't look well. It didn't look like it was going to go well for us. And I think that's part of the mentality that our team has, is just that grit mindset of, hey, you might have lost the last point, but you can still go win the next point. And to keep it small and manageable goals. But yeah, like getting to make that run in 22 at the national championship was so fun. And so many people on the beach were cheering for us, and like all the other teams, like, yeah, we're cheering for you, because ultimately everybody figured they would be able to beat us easier than whoever we were getting ready to play. So it was really, really neat to have all the support. Our seniors missed graduation, and so we do Oceanside graduation ceremony for them. And so we were down there, and it was really neat. A bunch of people from the tournament were like, oh, those are the Georgia State seniors. And it really just added, another level of depth to, the experience that they had missed by being at nationals and missing their graduation, and then being honored like that in that setting was really special.
Well, and then you backed it up in 23 by coming back to the tournament. It wasn't just, maybe the tournament, it didn't go quite as well as you would have liked in 23, but you came back, which is just that in and of itself is an accomplishment.
Yeah, and we changed conferences. So we're now playing in the Sun Belt. And so we knew going in that we would, again, we had one of the hardest schedules this year. And it was really interesting working with the team and navigating more losses than what we normally encounter. And like just helping people to understand, like, it's like your wins and losses are not the things that define you. It is how you play the game. It's how you communicate when you're stressed out. It's how you communicate when things are going well. And so I think we had one of the top 5 hardest schedules this season, but that was to prepare us for the Sun Belt. And we going in knew we'd have a lot of competition with Coastal, UNCW, like there's some really strong programs in the conference, but we were pretty confident that the path we had taken to get there had prepared us for it. So going in, we were going into nationals. We were really excited to have Southern Cal. We played them earlier in the year, and they're a great team, but I think, again, going into this tournament this year, like almost everybody felt beatable. And TCU, I think, was probably, from the schools that we had seen, like TCU was a powerhouse this year. And so I was excited that we were going to get to play SC. And so many people have said, it didn't go how you wanted. And to some degree, like I understand that, but we had 3 people graduate, and all 3 of them played some of their best games of volleyball at the national championship. So they all finished their careers holding their heads high. And we played against the team, and we lost the team that won the national championship. So that makes it feel a little bit better. That makes it feel better too. And we have such a strong core of returners that are just going to come back this next year and build on what we've started.
You talked a little bit about communication with your players and getting them to communicate. Tell me a little more about that. How do you, help them in these tough situations?
Yeah, we do. And I would say probably most beach programs, communication is paramount to your success. So we actually work with a sports psychologist. Her name is Latrice Lewis, and she'll come in the fall every other week, and she comes in weekly during season. And she, I think one thing that young women generally shy away from is conflict and debate. And to be a successful team, it's important that at least half the team can step into some of those conversations and be a little bit more comfortable in that space. And so Latrice has really worked with our team in being honest. Like, they all know each other very, very well, but in having those honest and hard conversations, you're actually building so many levels of trust because you're trusting someone to allow you to be vulnerable and to share something that's hard to share, or whatever the case may be. So we do a lot of work outside of the sand to get to know each other, so that when we're on the sand, we're playing for each other. We, we use a lot of like learning styles. So one of our blockers for the last 5 years is a processor. And we learned with her that it's better to give her statements than ask her questions. So if you ask her, do you want your set tighter? She's going to think about it too much. But if you say, hey, I'm going to set you tighter, she will know immediately that, nope, don't set me tighter. That's not the answer. And so a lot of it is learning each individual's preferred communication style and like how that might change based on if she's getting targeted or if she's not getting targeted. And so we spend a ton of time talking about how we can share the message quickly, concisely, and effectively when we're in the sand. I don't know. Did that answer your question, Steve?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think we talk about communication here a lot, but I think and I've been through some situations where using a psychologist or using someone who's familiar with that set of tools
Yeah.
with your team can be really helpful. And once they start getting it, I think that's kind of key. So I think that's the other thing that came to mind when you were talking was it struck me that when you were talking earlier about your experience playing, that attitude of the joy of being as good as you can be, as opposed to the joy of winning the match, is an important thing. And it sounds like you're passing that along to your players, which I think can make them really resilient. So that was kind of cool. I mean, does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. And we talk about that all the time. But there are controllables and there are uncontrollables. And you cannot control what the score is going to be at the end of the game. But you can control your communication, your attitude, and your effort in every single point, whether you win or you lose. And I think like beach volleyball and volleyball sports in general, right? They teach us so much about life afterwards. But I think the way that we learn to frame things as athletes and the way we can help our athletes learn to frame things is a lifelong skill and a lifelong tool that can really help them get through some hard times.
There's a burden that beach coaches have that indoor coaches I don't think have in our sport, and that's that you've got two coaches, maybe three if you have a GA. There are 5 teams playing at once in some venues. So the burden that you have is you cannot be there on the sideline. You have to teach those players how to be independent. What types of how are you doing that in practice? I mean, you talked a little bit about having the sports psychologist, and that's kind of a black box for a lot of us. But what kind of things are you doing in practice to help them be more independent?
Yeah. So, man, my goal would be no coaches at all, right? Like, because I think it's really important for the athletes to be able to problem solve. So a lot of what we'll do in practices, if we're doing something with like, I don't know, if you have 3 or 4 people on one side of the net, 3 or 4 people on the other, and they're kind of taking turns coming in and out, or if we've just got 2 versus 2, we'll stop and we'll say, all right, here's, identify what's not working, and then come up as a group with some things you guys can try to make it work better. And so instead of the coaches constantly saying, hey, do this, it's here's what we're seeing, or you guys figure out what it is that you're struggling with and identify the problem, and then come up with some different solutions that you can try to make this drill more competitive, more cooperative, whatever the case may be. Our strength coach, he does a ton of cool stuff with them. So they'll have running challenges, like sprint challenges, like benchmarks essentially that we have to pass on the football field before we get into the sand. And he'll give them the situation. So you have to have, you're going to have 2 lines, and everybody has, it's like a partner sprint. So BJ, you would run 60 yards, tag my hand, then I run 60 yards. And between the 2 of us, we have to finish it in 17 seconds, right? So he'll say, you're going to have 8 groups. 4 of them have to finish in under 16 seconds. 4 of them have to finish in under 18 seconds. So now we're identifying and being comfortable saying, hey, you're one of the faster people on the team. You're one of the slower people on the team. How do we put the pieces together to accomplish the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And so from day one, they have, little puzzles and things like that they're working to be comfortable saying, this is my strength. This is not my strength. I will need more help than somebody else might need in this situation. But we're going to all work together to do this to accomplish the goal. And I think the more that we can facilitate those conversations, the easier it is for them to do that in the sand quickly when there's not a coach on the court.
Using the, I forget the author, but the concept is radical candor, right? We're gonna be honest with each other without judgment. We're just stating some facts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm faster, you're slower. I jump higher, you jump over a credit card. It's and without, it's just a fact. It's not to say anything bad about anyone. It's just what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think on a health, and also understand that everybody's working to get faster. Everybody's working to jump higher. But where are we in this moment, and how do we use our strengths to accomplish whatever goal it is? And the more we can be comfortable with that, and knowing, like, BJ, I know you're really good at this. Steve, I know you're really good at this, and this is how we can do this together. And I think that oftentimes we'll have somebody who's out if they're injured or sick, and we let them be on the sideline offering solutions. Hey, you're not in it right now. What do you see? How can you help your team? And so I think really from a coaching capacity, I had the conversation with our team this year. Is like, I think at this point, our coaching staff drives you guys places, make sure you have food, and make sure you have a hotel room. And beyond that, I don't know much of what we do.
Well, that gets into the whole thing of when you're a coach like that, and you have a parent group that doesn't really understand what coaches do, and you're not yelling at their kid every minute. And again, it varies at level, but what are we paying you for? I'm like, well, right. There's a little bit of stuff there, but sometimes the what you're paying for us is to know when to get out of the way.
Yeah. And I think we have a team meeting at the beginning of the year, and we talk to parents. And just like, we'll always talk to parents if they're concerned about mental health or, some pattern they're seeing in their child's behavior. And we won't talk to parents about playing time, because it's important that the people on the team, all the team members, are learning how to advocate for themselves. And I think that's something as parents, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I know it's coming, that we want to protect our kids. We want to make their path easy. But sometimes I think letting them struggle a little bit and letting them go in and have some of those hard conversations with their coach, like, why am I not playing? What do I need to be doing differently to play? Those conversations, and again, just building that skill of learning to advocate for yourself and ask for what you want and what you need to do to get there, is a really important skill that transcends anything. Volleyball is going to stop at a certain point, and we're going to have the rest of our lives. And that skill is something that's important.
Well, I think there's the other piece of that is also knowing your own limitations, to quote paraphrase it. It's like, okay, when I played soccer in high school, I'm like, I'm not as good as these guys, and I'm just going to have to accept my role. And my favorite role story is that interview after Annie Drews stepped in the last Olympics after the injury. It's like, okay, yep, my job was to do this, and I need to be there, and I'm here, and let's go play.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's the magic of a team, when everybody understands their role, buys into their role, and is still trying to grow within the role as well. Yeah. But I would say too, our coaching style is based a lot more on empowerment and ownership for the athletes than fear or yelling. Like, we don't yell a lot. And I see how that could be really hard at like the juniors level, because the line that we walk is it empowerment or is it entitlement? Because one is really good and one is not very good. And so I think at a younger age, as people are developing and learning who they are, I think it is sometimes harder, because sometimes trying to empower someone might end up looking more like entitlement.
Speaking of coaching staff, you lost a long-time assistant in Tiff Creamer.
Yes.
What's are you able to say what her next gig
Yeah,
is, where she's off
super
to?
happy. So Tiff is getting married. She and Rina are going to get married in October, and they will probably try to start a family pretty soon, within a year or two. So Tiff is going to fully commit to playing professionally for the next year and like 1 to 2 years, and she has been doing that for the last 4 years. She's been playing internationally on the FIVB with all the futures tours. She's been going to all the qualifiers for the AVP, but what she has sacrificed to be our coach is all of the preseason training and working with a partner going into those first couple tournaments, which are so critical. And I think this year it really hurt her because she finished so strong last year. I think she finished with a 7th in the Tavares AVP and was just riding all this momentum, and then couldn't really play the first couple events, which really hurts for the partnership. So, I think, again, like going back to playing at that level, very few people have the discipline, the resources, and the time and the talent to do it. And she's in a position where she does. And I am so excited for her to just see what she's going to go do, and how much more she can really lean in and dive into all that training.
Yeah, she can come back to coaching.
That's what I told her. I was like, there are definitely moms who are playing, right? Like you look at Larissa and Liliana, you look at Betsy Flint, you look at Aurora. Like there are absolutely moms who play, but if she wants to play, this I think is an easier time to play, because once you have a child, then that's a whole lot, a lot more juggling you have to do. So she can come back to coaching. She is a phenomenal teacher, phenomenal educator, and an incredible coach. And so she's definitely put in that time that when she wants to do that, she'll be able to get back in.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're looking for a coach, or you have the next person in mind, or what do you?
We finalized interviews last week, and so I think we're going to announce it in the next week or two.
Cool. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we're not a scoop kind of news place, so we're not.
No, not at all.
We'll let your athletic department announce.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you? I'm in a new program. I'm working with a bunch of coaches that I worked with side by side for a year. Never knew them before that. So now I'm running the program. I'm the varsity coach, and I have these 4 people that are new to what I'm gonna, quote unquote dictate as
Yep.
what's about to happen. How much do you find yourself coaching your coaches and your athletic department and your support staff as compared to your players?
I love this question. So I feel like with our administration, I'll start there. So I've been working with Kelsey now, I don't know, for 7 or 8 years. She's my SWA. And she was actually on the NCAA Beach Volleyball Committee for a long time. And so I feel like initially when she talks about, she's like, initially, like she's got a basketball background. So she's like, yeah, Beth was having to teach me everything, because she had such a huge role in how our sport was going to grow. But now I feel like she's like, now we work very, very closely together, and she knows a lot more about what's happening usually than I do. So I've been really, really lucky in that capacity to have an administration that is so fully supportive of our program. I think the coaching education. So like with Tiffany coming out, she was a grad student for us. So she played for the first year, then she was director of ops, and a GA, and then got into the coaching space. And so for a lot of her development, like I'm learning, and I probably messed it up, and I'll probably do it better with this next round. But I do think like first it's like making that transition from playing to coaching. And are you coaching a team that you just played on? So how are you going to manage those friendships that you have with the team and not put you in a position where you're ever going to have to be someone who's disciplining them? And I know like Katie Leak did the same thing at LSU. And I remember talking to her when she was finally, everybody she had played with had graduated. And she was like, it's kind of a breath of fresh air, because you're no longer like, hey, we were friends, but we're not, like, now I'm your coach. And so I think just the education piece and helping these players who want to get into coaching to understand it's a lot less about your ego now, and it's a lot more about almost being a servant leader and helping to support the people and understanding what they need. It's not so much about what we need. Like that was something with Tiffany when she started working with us, was like, if I had any idea how much work you guys have to do on a daily basis that does not involve beach volleyball and practice, I promise I would not have come in as much as I did as a player. And I think, but I'm like, but that's the whole point, is if we're doing our jobs well as coaches, the way that we run our program, our players, the players on the team think we have all the time in the world for them, and they can come into our office anytime, because it's, those relationships are the most important thing. And all the paperwork, we can find time to do that later. But I think that's so vital to building what we're trying to build, is developing those relationships. And so if the players feel comfortable coming in, so that was one thing I was like, so Tiff, so now when they come in your office, you have to stop what you're doing, unless you're on a deadline, then that's all, then they always understand. But to stop what you're doing, and now it's about them, and how can we, be whatever it is that they need, or how we can help them grow in that role. So I think helping players coming out of college to kind of shift the focus and make it now much more about the players, and a lot more selfless. It's a hard thing to do, and Tiff did it phenomenally well.
You're not all that far away from a playing career. You still get out there and mix it up with them every once in a while. You get on the sand with them.
So the last time I played in practice was a Halloween practice, I think last year, and I lost badly, and I don't think I have recovered yet. Kelly, I was playing one of our kids who was a senior, Kelly Doran, and she was playing with Destiny, and she's like, Destiny, our only hope is if we just serve Beth really hard and we just get a bunch of aces. I was like, and they're just lighting me up with bullets. And I'm like, this is not fun. And I was playing with Tiff, and I was like, I am so sorry. But no, I love getting out there. And that's like one thing Tiffany was phenomenal with. Like Tiffany, I've never once heard her say no to playing volleyball. And I think as a coach, when you can jump in and be a little bit involved in the play on the court, you get a completely different perspective of what someone's struggling with, what they're seeing, what they're feeling. And I think that really helps. Like it really helped Tiffany to understand and kind of gravitate and adjust for each player that she was working with. But for me, if I'm going to jump in, I need about 25 to 30 minutes to warm up before I can actually start doing it in the sand. So I don't usually jump in at practice, but I hope I'll play again some this fall with them in the like less structured portions of the season. But I love playing and I love beach because it doesn't hurt your joints. You don't have to hit balls hard. You can shoot everything and poke everything. And it's a fun social sport. A lot of laughter.
I jumped in yesterday. We have we don't do open gym. We play on the grass one night, and then in the morning on Saturdays we play beach, all in preparation for our indoor season, which is coming up. So I jumped in yesterday at our beach session, and I'm even at my age, I'm more skilled than almost all of our players. I mean, I'm a better setter, I'm a better passer, and all that. But I'm just dying out there. I'm grabbing my knees and sucking wind and walking around, gathering up volleyballs when there's already 10 of them lined up on the court. I'm doing everything to stall.
Yeah. No, it's so fun. So your team plays grass and beach before they play indoor?
Yeah, we play grass during the summer. We play grass on Thursday nights, and we play beach on Saturday mornings. And it's just, some of it's my bias. Our team needs touches. They're just, they haven't had enough touches. There's not a lot of players that play club and that sort of thing. So I'm like, well, I know where I got a lot of touches as a player. So we're going to, we went and bought 20 outdoor balls, and I have a bunch of nets. So we just set them up we have a nice beach right on Lake Michigan. So we go down there and set up and play. So it's a grand experiment. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I would love to hear how that plays out. And it's so neat. I think it's so neat when the sports all work together, because I do there's so much value when we have an indoor kid come out to the sand. Like it's a skill set that makes our team better. And then when the kids that are playing beach go in and do something indoor. We have a couple kids that still love playing indoor, so they'll go play pickup, and it's neat how the sports can really complement each other in different ways.
Yeah,
How much do you think that?
Go ahead.
Steve. Sorry.
Our end of the year banquet for the boys is boys don't have beach here, but the girls do, but we go over to the beach courts and picnic, and it's and they'll stay there all night if you can reserve the courts that long. And it is a good experience for them. And then some of them go out and play beach, just hang out. And if you get some of that now, 118, it's probably not your best time to go out and play beach. But it's, I used to play a little bit, and I'd get sand socks or something like that. Oh man, my family would give me grief. I'm like, listen, with my feet, you got to protect them, or you're not going to last very long. So there's a whole game to that. But I think there is a lot of transfer, and there is a lot of my son and I played against two friends of ours, and they are not mobile. They are not. And they just crushed us. It was like, it's fun. And I'm sure you did a little bit. I remember when we were playing indoor, my son was coming to it was an indoor rec thing on a Sunday, and he was 16. And he said, Dad, you old guys have some shots that I've never seen before. I'm like, yeah, there you go. That's how we keep playing.
Mad respect. Yeah. No, and I think it's so cool sitting on the side and watching for so long as we do as coaches, because I've learned more as a coach probably than I did as a player. Because as a player, I feel like I was so much more tied to the outcome of a contact or the outcome of a play. And as a coach, I'm so much more fascinated with the problem that we're trying to solve. And Tiffany has said it too, like just from coaching alone, how much her game has improved, even when she's not in the sand as much as she was as a player, because you just see it from a different perspective, and you don't have the pressure of being in the arena, and you can kind of sit on the side and be like, oh yeah, this, that, and the other. And I think the thing that players that are maybe outside of their physical peak, the thing that we all develop is vision, right? So if you have vision, you can, especially in the sand, like when there's not six people on the other side of the court, if you have vision, you can really hang with most teams, with most players. And I think it's such a neat thing that you're able to develop a lot of that vision from the sideline.
Yeah. Yeah. Kessel was always telling us that if you coach it, you get to be a better player. And that certainly for me was true. How do we get our players to coach somebody else? Like this now because you were a player and you transitioned into being a coach, which that's a difficulty in and of itself. How do you find a place where your players can coach some young beach players?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is like understanding who even wants to do that, because we have a handful of kids on our team that'd be like, that sounds terrible. So I wouldn't even bother. But what they will do is for example, we've had a couple of indoor players come join our program in the spring. And the girls on our team that don't love coaching younger players, I will give them an indoor player and say, so like, again, going back to Kelly, Truth came to our team from indoor. She was an indoor setter and was like, hey, Kelly, you have 2 practices. Teach Truth how to play beach volleyball. And so now she's working with someone who's a peer who's able to listen. And it was great for Kelly because she was out for a week with the injury. And so she actually said, she was like, it was so good to go back through all the fundamentals and revisit all of these things. But I do think there's so many clubs now in so many different areas that people can go and coach. And I know there's like more and more beach programs that are trying to invite local schools to come do like a day clinic or, something like that. And I think it's just any opportunities that we can create. And I think in that capacity, you say, hey, this is community service. This is 3 hours of community service, and it really helps the team, and we're giving back to our community, and people are willing to do that. But yeah, we've had over the years, we have a handful of players on our team that coach year round for different clubs. And it's like, you can see the people that coach because they see the game at a different level.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Technical question for you.
Yes.
One of the positive things that we have extra burden as beach coaches, but there's also a super benefit when you're on the court. You can draw circles and lines and anything anywhere where you want to on the court. You find yourself doing that, like you just drag a
Oh,
foot and say it's got to be here or there or whatever.
100%. So we have a game that we play. It's a competitive game with our team. It's called Team Fontana. It's a drill that when I was training, when we trained with Barb Fontana, it was a drill that she would do all the time. And she draws the perimeter of the court. And it's like, for her lines are probably like 6 inches, like 4 to 6 inches from the sidelines. For us, it's more like 6 to 8 inches from the sideline. And it ends up looking like a heart or like a lima bean. So you leave the deep corners open for jumbos. You leave the cut shots open, and then the deep middle seam. And so it ends up looking like a heart in the sand. And we just have competitions of, Group A is trying to play against Group B, and whoever hits, the zones X amount of times wins. Yeah, and then like as you're explaining and teaching, there's so many visual learners that, yeah, you can draw. Hey, this is, when you're hitting a cut shot, you just drag your heel. This is the piece of the court or the piece of pizza that the cut shot should be landing in. And I think with indoor, you can do that. You can, put tape down or you can use cones, but it's really great to be able to move the ground as a beach volleyball coach.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely love it. Yesterday we got into we with our younger players, they have zero concept of how to play on the beach. So we they're always they're they're pushing to a target. They want to pass to a target, zone 6 indoor. We want, a ball over there. Like, well, it's not quite like that on the beach. It's a little different. So I draw this circle kind of in the middle of the court. We call it our circle of trust. And
Yep.
then, the players are passing toward that circle and the ball is going super tight to the net every time. So I draw a line, perpendicular line to the net, tangent
Mhm.
to the circle. And I
Yep.
said, I used the word tangent with the player. And I said, do you understand what a tangent is? She's like, yeah, I was in geometry. I know what we're talking about. So we're getting some extra math lessons in there too.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah, it's
That's
cool. I'm
fun.
glad you're doing
Yeah, and it is like it's so many of our kids that are playing beach volleyball are such visual learners, and I have found that sometimes I'll talk to someone, one of the kids on our team, for I don't know how many months. I was like talking to her about how she's forming her platform, the angle of her platform, and then finally I was like, "Can you just make it go here?" And as soon as we said make it go here, she's like, yeah, I can make it go there. And it's like, that's what we need you to do. And so again, like constantly learning about the team, but it is like you just draw the little circle in the sand. She's like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then suddenly her platform and her angles, all of the things that I've been specifically talking about are happening automatically because she has a circle in
Yeah.
the sand that she's trying to make the ball go to.
Hey, BJ,
And I
why did Lauren Anderson just jump into my head?
Yeah, we, it's, it's all over the place. So Lauren thinks about that kind of stuff all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's just like, you just figure out what makes somebody click and you speak their language and and we have the ability to draw lines in the sand, which is super, super helpful.
We got a kid that's a midliner. She always wants to pass midline and has to. And so yesterday, the exact same thing we were talking about. I showed her, on the beach, you have to reach. If you don't
Yeah.
reach, you're not going to get the ball. So I
Correct.
was taking this kid, and I had her hold her platform out. A ball had just gone over her head, and she didn't
Okay.
know what to do.
Okay.
So I grabbed her platform, which she's holding by her knees, and I said, "Now, don't let your feet move." And I grabbed the platform and moved. And as soon as I moved her platform about a foot, her feet, she's already moving her feet.
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you're stuck
You
in
don't need
concrete now.
Yeah.
You're stuck in concrete. Let me move the platform. And it was like trying to bend a tree trunk. She did not want to let me pull that platform up around so that she could hold her hands above her head and
Yeah.
reach for that ball. But once she did it one time, then it got a lot easier for her. It
Yeah.
was pretty amazing.
It's incredible how quickly they can learn if they're willing to take that risk and to get outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And I think so
Are
much
you,
of that comes back to the relationship that she has with you. Like she's going to trust you that you're going to help figure out what's going to work best for her. And if we don't build that relationship, she's going to be like, well, that looks silly. Why would I do that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Are you running into, even with your college athletes, are you running into really, like they're not willing to go 100% because they don't want to look stupid if they make a mistake? That's a barrier that I struggle with a lot.
Yeah. If someone doesn't go 100% on our team, I don't have to deal with it because the team will. Like that is just not an acceptable solution ever. Now there will be days, obviously we're practicing every day. So there are some days that, hey, I got 4 hours of sleep last night. I failed my test this morning. I'm going to give you 100%, but it's not going to look like 100% from 2 days ago, which we get that part too. But I think that's just one of our core agreements on our team, that if you're not, and so like, that's again, like going back, Steve, to what you're talking about earlier, like not yelling. So when we have someone that's not giving 100%, I don't yell. I'll just walk over and be like, hey, go have some water, go sit down, take a second. When you're ready to come back and give your best effort, your best attitude, and your best communication, then come join us. Like, no, I'm not mad at you for not giving your best, but you don't get to stay on the court. Like that's a right that you earn.
I have players that are far more conservative because they don't want to, they don't want to make a mistake. And I'm the guy that's like, hey, come on, let's take a swing. Let's, I can't stand roll shot.
Right.
So, indoor anyway. Outdoor, you have to use it, but indoor, it's no roll shots. It's let's go for a shot.
Yeah.
It's not to get the ball in. It's to make them make a mistake. I mean, that's the part that we struggle with. It's harder to see, I think, on the beach. It's harder to see that kind of stuff because there's always another shot available.
Yeah, there's always something else available. Well, one of the things, and I'm sure you guys have all sorts of ways to address it, but one of the things that we have found that works really well, if we're trying to teach, like hitting hard line is the hardest for most people, right? Especially if we have some shorter players. And so one of the ways that we'll teach it is we'll draw that perimeter, that we're talking about from Barb Fontana, on the line, and we'll say, hey, when you hit it, it's worth 3. If you miss it, it's only -1, right? So there's this massive benefit in hitting hard line, because if you can miss it 3 times and get it once and you still haven't lost anything. And so we try to do a lot, especially in our fall when we're teaching, where errors are just, hey, it's like a little sting, but it's not the end of the world. It's just part of the game. It's part of our learning. And the team will discuss like when we want to start decreasing our errors, like what point in the fall now we want to start focusing on, now we need to be getting the majority of our plays in, when we have times where we allow the errors and we want to build a skill, and then times when we want to clean it up and make it, more competitive ready. And so I think that's always fun to just talk with them about that. Like, hey, in this game, we don't care where the ball goes. We care what your feet are doing. We care what your arm is doing. And if you can hit the ball that hits the mural before it hits the ground, I'm going to be super proud of you, because I don't think you can hit it that hard, But it is, especially I think with beach, you can feel so vulnerable because it's just the two of you. And it's really scary to do your best and come up short. But it's also a really hard pill to swallow if you don't do your best and you lose. Like that's not a good feeling either. And so I think what we try to do a lot is just have it a non-negotiable that we always give our best effort, and anything less than that, someone on the team usually will be like, hey, let's do a sideline, or let's grab a quick sip of water and go talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm finding with my boys, it's defining what a best effort is. So I've got my number one outside. We got the vert out the other day, and I won't go over, but I mean, basically his vertical was half of some of the players. Mm-hmm. And and he just looked at it, and I said, guys, we're here to score points,
right?
And this player knows how to score points, and and we've talked about how you score points, and all of you guys are going for the big crush, and that's good if it's put to where it needs to be to score a point.
Yeah.
So let's work on that. You got a 35-inch vertical. Let's use that to score points instead of, show what testosterone can actually do.
Right. Right. No, I think that that is always really interesting because especially for beach, and I think indoor does a lot of it too, like how much emphasis we put on what we're doing in the weight room and what we're doing with speed and conditioning. And our strength coach, JD, does a phenomenal job of being like, this is only to make you better at volleyball, right? Like, so you might be squatting the most, you might be deadlifting the most, you might be jumping the highest. But if you're not using that to make yourself better at beach volleyball, then you're just going to have the weight room records and you're not going to have time in the sand. And so I think it's really incredible to see how the athletes understand that more and more each year. Like we're doing all these extra things so that we can be better athletes. And if we're better athletes, then we can be better volleyball players or better beach volleyball players. And understanding that every single person's strength is different. So some people are great servers, some people are great setters, like whatever it's going to take to help your team score the point. If you can use those strengths over and over, that's what we're looking for. And like, I love the idea of like the ugly scoring, like ugly points are still points. And Tiff always says that. She's like, a point is a point is a point is a point. Doesn't matter how you got it, move on to the next one.
We say that all the time. The beach is just about you survive, survive their attack. If you can shovel that ball over in some way and just keep surviving, eventually you can wear them down.
Yeah, because it is exhausting. Did you guys ever watch the Lindquist sisters play the AVP?
Yeah.
So I've heard so many stories. So I got to play them. Like my very first ever time I made the main draw, we played them. I was like, oh my goodness, it's exhausting. But they apparently would train all the time against 3 people on the other side of the court. That's how they would play. Like that's what made them great. And they would exhaust you playing against them. And they use that as one of their strengths because they could keep every ball up and they could make you run across your entire court every time they send it over.
Yeah, that's a cool way of. I love that imbalance training. We play 2 versus 6 or 3 versus 6 a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes just out of necessity on a club team, you've only got 9 players, or 8 players. But then everybody takes a chance on the 2 side, and some of that's because my personal favorite is beach, so it's. They get that chance over in the 2s, and the 6s still then get to work on their side out game, which is kind of cool. But yeah, that imbalance makes the short side so much better, so much faster. It's amazing.
Yep.
I found if you play 6-on-4, the 4 at my level, the 4 is going to win every time.
Oh wow. Yeah.
It's just because they have less communication challenges. They're early enough. Everybody knows their job. Now, again, I like to think that's before I've worked with them much, but probably even after I've worked with them much.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what we all hope, right?
Yeah. So we're actually probably past our hour a little bit, so we should probably wrap up here pretty quick. But a question that I didn't get to ask coming out of your 2022-23 seasons, you had so much success. Were you able to get a little bit of a recruiting bump out of that, or do people really not notice?
Yeah, people ask me this question all the time. So it would definitely, that run we had in 2022, I'm following it up in 2023 with returning to the national stage, definitely has put us on people's radars that, maybe we were, maybe we weren't before. But I would also say like a lot of the kids that have already come into our program have had exceptional backgrounds as well in their juniors career. And so we like to keep a bit of a smaller roster. So we're really picky too. But it's been really fun getting to have some conversation and interest from, I would say what it did was put us on people's maps that are not necessarily in the Southeast. And so I think that's been fun, like getting to talk to players from all over the country. And we usually have a couple of international players on our team as well. So
I saw that.
Yeah, it's not such a big deal on the international side, but it's been really nice just domestically having calls with people from all over the country.
Yeah, that's cool. I always sort of wonder about that. You know, you have a big year, and then can you turn it into something?
Yeah. Yeah. And
What do
I
you?
don't know. I think it's really interesting because, with the Power Five schools in beach volleyball, like there's just a group of kids that are only going to look at Power Five and they're not interested in mid majors. Until they get the no's from the Power Fives, and then they suddenly are super interested in mid majors. And so I think there's a lot of that, and we don't rush our recruiting process in any way, shape, or form. Like we're still working on 24. So I think that part doesn't always mesh well with the kids that are like gung ho to commit right away, because for us it's a lot more involved than just, are you a good beach volleyball player and do you want to come to Georgia State?
Yeah. How long before? How long before Stein has Texas in any sort of shape where they get onto? I mean, doesn't it changes the sport to some degree,
It
doesn't it?
totally changes well, it's interesting because that's been the big question, right? It doesn't change how good any one player is. Like the level of player, like these kids are all working so hard to be their best all the time. So that's not going to like go flying up. But I think what will be really interesting is Texas is absolutely a powerhouse on the junior scene. And so a lot of these kids coming out of Texas, the best players have gone to SC or UCLA or looked at FSU, like some of those top tier programs. And so many of them, like there's just so much pride in Texas. Like
Now they
they
get to
won,
do this.
yes, yeah. And so I think it will be interesting to see, and he's already got a great group of transfers that have come back to Texas, and they're all from Texas. And so I think it will be really interesting, especially because they're going to have some of those indoor kids that are going to play, and he's going to get them up and running really quick, and it's going to just be incredible. It'll be
Yeah,
fun to see. I think the bigger questions is when Texas moves to the SEC, does that put pressure on one or two SEC schools to add beach volleyball? And now is SEC sponsoring beach volleyball? Because I think when that happens, then that sets up an even bigger wave for our sports growth than Texas.
I'm waiting for, and this is selfish, of course, being from Wisconsin, but I've had this daydream of I go down to Wisconsin, talk to the athletic director who was a contemporary of mine at the university, and say, hey, look, let's build a beach facility and start a team. I'll help you. Let's get it going.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, total daydream. But once somebody in the Big Ten, the money is there, right?
The money
is
there. Yeah.
Somebody's going to build a 4-court indoor facility if they haven't already. Maybe somebody already has one. I don't know, like a Penn State or Michigan State or
right.
Hell, maybe even Wisconsin could do something like that. Once those dominoes fall,
then the whole thing will take off. I think the next biggest barrier. So once we get some of these conferences to add, the next barrier we have is the scholarship. So beach volleyball is an equivalency sport and indoor is a head count sport. So edging your bets and knowing how many the indoor teams there are and how many beach teams there are, the odds are just better to go indoor on a full scholarship than beach on a partial scholarship. So I think the next big piece of growth, which I don't know if that's the NCAA's view that they want to go to, but if we were able to become a head count sport, or if we were able to get 8 or 10 scholarships. So I think that's one of the really interesting arguments right now, is that indoor generally will have 12 to 15 scholarships count, and they have only 12, and they have only 7 people starting with a libero. And beach, you have 6 full scholarships and you have 10 people playing. And so we're much more like tennises and baseballs and softballs, and they've been in that structure for a long time. So I don't know that it's in the NCAA's plan for us to become more funded, but I think that would be the next big step. That's when you're going to see these kids that are going and playing Big Ten, SEC for indoor only. If they can have the same financial package for the beach, that's when I think we'll start seeing some of those really, really physical, like a lot more of those physical kids that are going to consider both.
There are some mid-majors that don't have football, that don't have
Yeah,
Division I football that are playing. So that's a balance too. As soon
right.
as you make it a full scholarship sport, that's, I have to believe that's maybe the travel or maybe the scholarships. Those are the most expensive things about having
Mm-hmm.
the program.
Mm-hmm.
So if you all of a sudden bump up to 10 full,
Yeah, it would be
then
a lot.
there's going to
But
be
if
some schools, right?
yeah, it would be really interesting to see how that would go. And maybe, this is just my wish list, but like maybe we start at 8, because I think it would, and we can have 14 humans on our team who are getting athletic aid, right? So if we go to 8, and that, then all of a sudden people are going to have a little bit more money. And if we could get to 10, that would be great. But I also see the administrative side of all of this. And like,
Yeah.
if you're going to bump everybody's budgets up, like, where's that money coming from? But I think those two pieces for this like next wave of explosive growth for beach volleyball will be getting SEC and Big Ten sponsoring our sport. And then if there was more scholarship money, that's when I think you start seeing some of, or maybe not the best indoor players at the juniors level, but like that next tier down, we'll start looking at playing beach. And we've had, we definitely have a couple of kids playing in the college space that would have been top recruits on the indoor side too, but it's a lot less. They're more outliers.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha. All right, well, I got to cut us off. Otherwise, I'll ask you questions all day.
No, this
Yeah.
has been so fun talking to you guys. Thank you for
Yeah,
taking time to
thanks.
connect.
Thanks. Are you going home to Tampa for the AVCA?
Yeah, I'm super
Cool.
excited. I get to not have to stay in a hotel this time. I'll hang out with my mom.
Oh,
Nice.
all right. Well,
Yeah, you
I'm
guys
sure,
gonna be down there?
sure I'll run
You guys,
into there.
cool.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, it was great to have you today, Beth, and we appreciate it. And hopefully, maybe we'll get together in the future. But have a great upcoming season after you get a chance to decompress a little bit and recruit a little more.
Thank you. And best of luck to both of you guys as you're ramping up here for the chaos of your seasons.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah.
See you next time, BJ.
All right.